Horror is a formative genre for me. I grew up watching a ton of R-rated horror movies that I probably shouldn't have seen, but I'm glad that I did because it meant that I grew up on things like Ju-On, The Strangers, Dark Water, and many other classics. I'd go on to enjoy things like RPG Maker horror games and survival horror and web series like the seminal work that is Marble Hornets. Last year for Halloween, I did kind of a funny concept where I took a bunch of cursed videos and dismantled their veracity because I pointed out that the vast majority of them are from a Koji Shiraishi movie, who you might know for Noroi the Curse, which is a pretty famous horror movie. This year I wanted to have fun writing something, so I tried to think of something creative that I could talk about. Despite my formative years being defined by horror, I don't really enjoy the vast majority of horror anymore. And it's easy enough to be a fraud that conflates falling out of love with something with the genre lacking anything worth engaging with. I stress that I love gaming despite the numerous things that people want me to be mad about, and I have enough self-awareness to realize that my feelings about horror are not an indictment of the state of the genre. I know why I don't really enjoy modern horror, and this is not a case for why you ought to feel the same, but tapping into a feeling that I'd wager at least a few of you resonate with. A lot of horror is content, and I don't mean to sound like a gatekeeper, but I hate that about it. I'm not going to slander your favorite analog horror series or call it trite. It's how audiences engage with horror that's changed over time. And that makes the suspension of disbelief borderline impossible for me. I think that when settings, creatures, and the mythology of horror disappears, I become less and less interested. This is not some ideal that creators and fandoms have to follow just to appease me specifically, but as we put the magnifying glass up to scary concepts, the magic of it all kind of dissipates for me.
Could she really be here, waiting for me?
In YouTube's infancy, going viral was a fundamentally different beast. Ads weren't as laser focused, and having like 10,000 subs meant that you had real reach. I recall sketch comedy being king until things like Minecraft and horror let's plays changed the game up. A lot of information on the internet is just junk. We've got random spam comments impersonating YouTubers, AI art is flooding the tags of a character from a niche series that nobody draws, and Twitter is borderline unusable if you say words like essay, crypto, hacked, or commission. Wait, I'm getting distracted. Horror is a funny genre because it can be tempting to dismiss it as rather niche, but people ignore the cultural impact of things like the Blair Witch Project or Paranormal Activity. As horror as a genre evolves, so too does marketing and designing horror. When I was younger, a lot of popular horror movies inferred or explicitly stated that they're based on true events because the ability to make the audience believe something that defies reason is a tried and true marketing strategy. Even the Conjuring movies feign some interest in being believable, if only because Ed and Lorraine Warren are real people and some of the cases are based in reality. Nobody watches them thinking, oh yeah, this definitely happened. But the first and second Conjuring movies are in fact based on real events. Being inspired by true events is not proof of the paranormal, but if there's even 1% chance the audience thinks it could have happened, they're way more likely to enjoy the story. I don't want you to think that horror has to be plausible from a logical perspective, because it doesn't. I love stuff like Marble Hornets, Alan Tutorial, Everyman Hybrid, or something like Ben Drowned, even though the last one has a hilarious meme ending. It'd honestly be difficult for a series like Marble Hornets to exist today, because savvy communities can identify places where things are recorded, they can find out the identities of the actors playing the different characters, and the speed at which information spreads around has increased dramatically. It's quite obvious that none of these things are real today, but the novelty and originality in these early horror series is what makes them so immersive. Now we have words to clear the fog. We can say web series, analog horror, creepypasta, ARG, and all these other terms that draw clearly defined boundaries of fiction, which means that immersion has to come from presentation, coherent narrative, and execution. You don't earn someone's time and commitment to your series just because your weird video hasn't been debunked yet. I don't think being plausible was ever the point. I think it's a mix of the fact that there's an absence of reality checks, combined with the fact that these series go to lengths to ground the world's lore and concepts in the viewer's mind. It could be a world just like our own, but a fork occurred somewhere down the road. Things like Minecraft, cars, and all these other things that we know probably exist, but perhaps we're trapped in some apocalyptic scenario. Suspending disbelief varies from person to person, but it's genuinely grating how easy it is to become inundated with information about horror even if you don't want it. Projects like alternate reality games have clearly defined rules and goalposts that are inferred through roundabout means, but everyone trying to solve the mystery usually acknowledges that it's fiction while working hard at the puzzle as if it weren't. It takes mystery and horror to that interactive medium that's distinct from video games, and it's far less passive than just watching something. You have entire communities banding together to solve a mystery that's fictional, and they love that. When I was younger, I really liked the No Sleep subreddit because people cultivated a space where suspending your disbelief was a requirement. You had to act like everything was true, or at the very least engage with some level of sincerity. Spaces like that don't really last because having a public space where you write horror fiction and everyone has to behave is a prime target for trolling. You can give disingenuous replies, you can post your own shitpost stories and just grief people. There's no requirement that you have to engage with it earnestly, even if the community wants you to. It often feels like everything is just about algorithms and the line going up. While I genuinely enjoy watching horror and horror analysis, I can't help but feel frustrated by how uniquely commodified horror is. Things like Blair Witch, Paranormal Activity, Saw, and the Conjuring movies prove that Western audiences do like horror, and YouTube is a hotbed for horror content like mysteries, true crime, and a host of other content, and it just makes me wonder how much is too much. I like art because creativity often inspires other artists to create in response to their art, and with Marble Hornets making horror web series kind of mainstream, we got so many forks in the road that allowed other aspiring filmmakers to pop up and make something they believed in. Is overexposure the antithesis to engendering lasting and meaningful horror? No. Because if that was true, people wouldn't love the community-driven horror mythos of something like the SCP Foundation. It's honestly really tempting to knock horror content for children like the average Five Nights at Freddy's theory video or how over-monetized Poppy's Playtime supposedly is, but I feel like content creators and developers are just seizing power that exists in a vacuum. There's a market for this, which is why these tactics succeed in a medium driven by metrics. I'm not saying that you're not allowed to have fun because things aren't made that personally fascinate me. That would be like getting mad that Atome games are made just because I don't play them. I just think that how we engage with content has changed, and that only bothers me with horror. I like the unknown. I like the mystery, the ephemeral nature of mysterious and freaky beings without grounding them with a torrent of information. Sometimes it's worth knowing what the creature is, and Silent Hill 2 is legend status even though the monsters are grounded in deeper lore, but I feel like newer horror series get chewed up and spit out just as fast as memes get run into the ground. There's a compulsion to know things, to have things explained to you, to listen to breakdowns on things you've never explored, and I'm guilty of this. I write video essays where I explain enough about what you need to know to listen to the analysis, without ever engaging with it beyond my own rhetoric. But with horror, I can't bring myself to do that. I don't want to over-explain the narrative and themes of a piece of horror media. I don't want to delve into this thing that I love because I'm afraid that the more I try to ground what something is, at least my interpretation of it, the more I might tarnish the magic of something I care about. Why is it different for horror? That's a question I still don't have a concrete answer to. I guess I struggle to accept that a lot of consumption after the credits roll is about making the intangible tangible. It's about enjoying more. And for me, that's equivalent to undermining the mystery element that I'm attracted to.
What is this? What's going on here?
Have you ever been inside an elevator and noticed that sometimes there's no 4th or 13th floor? Their absence is rooted in superstition, that wariness of the unknown regardless of any empirical basis to fear those things. A fear of the number 4 is called tetraphobia, which is prevalent throughout Asia, because the pronunciation bears similarities with words for death in a number of Asian languages, such as Mandarin and Japanese. Why would people fear something so irrational and coincidental? Is a superficial similarity really worth making a building with a floor 3B instead of a 4? I don't think the answer actually matters. What's important is the consequence of irrational fear. It's this unknowable and weird territory where coherent logic isn't enough to uproot generational advice in the form of superstition. It's like Pascal's wager, except you're avoiding bad omens. You're not fucking with demons, because honestly, who would try to get a curse or something equally stupid? There's an entity here. Please knock 3 times. Doesn't look like we're going to get anything, so let's try a different one. If there's an entity here, I give you free reign to take control of my body. You can do whatever you want, and you're welcome to enter it. Look at that. Nothing's happened. Yeah, so I don't think curses are real, or I have a really high spiritual defense. What do you guys think? The fact that the human mind can process such irrational fears as behavioral guidelines is crazy, but for writers, artists, and filmmakers, this tendency to have that unexplainable fear inside us is the perfect launch pad for delving into the weird, into the unknown, and making innocuous concepts terrifying. Who knows when clowns first became scary, but it sure as hell got worse after It came out. Scary chainmail that I have to forward or else I'll die? That's light work. Videotape that kills you in 7 days? Nah, take it easy. What about being killed in the middle of fucking nowhere just because you're home?
Is Jerma here?
No, you got the wrong house.
You sure?
Yeah. I'm sorry.
I'll see you later. Why are you doing this to us? Because you were home.
What about a pale woman who moves erratically, repeating the most uncomfortable death rattles you've ever heard? And no matter where you go, you just aren't safe from her. Do you like checking who's at the door before you open it? Maybe a knife will come through and stab you in the eye. Or maybe a ringtone that isn't yours will play through your phone, indicating that you're going to die. When you describe them plainly, they sound so silly, they sound so harmless. Yet they don't lose any stopping power when you're watching them. It's like filmmakers have unearthed primal fear that humans didn't know they had, and I love that. I love how horror evokes this unknowable quality about ourselves. Shit, I wasn't even afraid of the dark until I saw Juan when I was like 8 years old, and then I was petrified of her pale skin, that clicking sound, and the darkness in general. I knew that no matter where I was, a cursed lady could get me from any angle and I'd just be helpless like the characters in the movies. Kayako being this unknowable and unstoppable entity, bearing this deep grudge. It's not real, but the terror she inflicts on the audience is. It feels real. As wild as it sounds, I really like that primordial fear that horror can evoke from us. So when things get reduced down to just memes and overanalyzed, I feel like the magic is gone. The tools of logic, rhetoric, and all that intellectual stuff makes the mist over Silent Hill dissipate. It makes the novelties of unfathomable things that we can't fully explain explainable. It's not that my head needs to be free of subtext and critical thoughts. It's that horror feels like an ant under a magnifying glass, scorched by the light of heaven because we need to turn it into modernized content. It can't end when the credits roll, we have to get more from it. Of course, not all horror movies want to be thoughtful or thematically confusing by nature, but I just see so many videos of this creature explained or the history of this horror franchise. All this desire to have more, to know more about things that you don't necessarily need over-explained to you, maybe that takes away some of the magic. It does for me at least. It's not that horror media itself is becoming bad. It's that horror is commodified and spread in a way that feels so commercialized. If more people like the things that I do, I'm happy. I don't care that a lot of people like it. I don't mind that a lot of people like the same things as me. That would be insane to be mad about. At the very least, I want some horror to have a balance of being mysterious while simultaneously being sincere, because those things withstand the test of time. Making jokes and memes about the things we love isn't the same thing as ruining it, but horror is something that's so easy to turn into content that I roll my eyes before I even sit down and engage with something. I know that's a me problem. But why watch a web series when my favorite YouTuber is going to make a 2-hour explanation? Why engage with the community and social aspect of ARGs when I can just listen to a 20-minute summary that doesn't credit any of the relevant players? Why should I feel terrified when I've had the gimmick explained in the worst possible fashion? I feel like sometimes someone has colored my impression of something so I can't take it seriously, and that's difficult for me to accept. Why bother complaining about all this when I'm basically talking in circles? I still love horror movies. I love watching the odd video essay on mysteries and the paranormal, and horror games have been on the comeback for years now. That doesn't mean all creators are lazy or uninspired. Some of my favorite YouTubers primarily talk about horror and tangentially related themes. But interesting horror content that's fed to you through the algorithm is a false representation of what modern horror is. For every Five Nights at Freddy's full timeline explained video, there's probably numerous thoughtful reviews, critiques, and retrospectives and whatnot about some niche PS1 game you've never heard of. Even then, those Five Nights at Freddy's videos probably have a lot of effort and labors of love that I just don't understand. I'm just not the target audience.
Why do I always get the weirdos?
Silent Hill 2 is one of the most beloved horror games of all time. It integrates survival elements, psychological horror, mysteries, and an unforgettable atmosphere to discovering the sins buried in the memories of the protagonist. In later Silent Hill entries, you see Red Pyramid, or Pyramid Head, is kinda just chilling there, even though he's unique to James Sunderland's torment. Why are we shoehorning an iconic character where he serves no narrative purpose? You can stick a character anywhere you want, but using them as iconography without understanding the foundational elements that make their impact what they are in the original text, it's kind of stupid. If you hold anything in high regard, surely more of that thing is better. But iterating on a concept without even understanding why it's popular is just a recipe for creating mid.
It's gonna happen again.
Look at the average Hollywood adaptation of a video game. They usually lack the heart and soul that people love about those games, and Silent Hill fans know this all too well. I'm not necessarily saying that everything has to be deep and meaningful. I go out and watch the latest Fast and Furious movies not expecting anything but a dumb time, but that dumb fun is core to my enjoyment. Making a bad adaptation is just disrespecting the source material for no reason. It just feels like people are cashing in on something they know is popular without taking the time and earnest engagement to figure out what it is that people love about it. They know that tickets will sell and that using the iconography will be an eye catch. If you've watched the Ju-On movies, you probably feel this same thing where you watch more and more entries and you realize this is just regurgitating the same concepts without meaning, without grounding any meaningful consequences. Horror doesn't have to be thoughtful, but that's not a free pass to be uninspired and formulaic. I feel like the whole mythos of The Grudge was kind of in limbo until we got the reboot from Netflix, because that show leaves the canon intact and retells the story in a unique and interesting way. When horror franchises or characters get milked, you see more of the same thing repeatedly. When something feels creatively uninspired, it's easy to tell that a jump scare should happen here. This nickname creature is going to be there. That chaotic and mysterious element of horror is just going to be gone from that because of all the information that's thrown your way. A movie or a franchise being popular isn't enough to make it bad or unserious, but if our consumption moves from genuine enjoyment of setup and execution to simply, I see this creature and I smile, I just feel like that times have changed and I didn't change with them. Most long-standing horror franchises have horrible entries in them. They're constantly trying to reboot or restart the franchise, and I've heard the recent Halloween movies were just god-awful, but I couldn't say because I haven't seen them. When I feel like I'm becoming numb to what something is trying to do, that doesn't make me happy because I'm the smartest guy in the room. It makes me feel sad because I can't enjoy something I want to like. I want this level of sincerity and staying power that isn't born from a desire to make money and sell merchandise. Games like Inscryption and Fear and Hunger stand out to me in that regard. They're different, but they're labors of love that feel like they were just made with care. That makes me happy as opposed to seeing the 30th Backrooms game on Steam. I'm realizing that I'm not against horror as a genre. I'm just jaded at the medium having so many works that are just meant to get chewed up and spit out as fast as possible. A lot of content about horror fuels that jaded feeling, but I'm not stupid enough to think that this is proof that the genre is dead or nobody cares about what they make. I acknowledged that in the beginning. When I started writing this, I didn't really know what I wanted to say and what I wanted to accomplish. I wanted to talk about why I've checked so far out of horror. All I did was remember that I loved it and that I still love it. In the algorithm-driven internet, it's so easy to get a false picture of reality. It misleads you about what matters and what's valuable. There's no analytical tool that can match the complexity of our existence. Things like recommendations and advertisements are just approximations that try to box us in despite the very complex existences we lead. So when I think about why horror sucks, I realize that it's just easier to say that than to venture out and rediscover what it is I loved about the genre growing up, or even bother to learn new things to love about the genre as an adult. I think I still despise the vast majority of content that capitalizes on grounding the mythological, chaotic, and unknowable elements of horror down into convenient boxes for consumption. Some people like that, some people prefer that to actually engaging with horror, and I get it. People love hearing about things they've never touched. That's why so many people appreciate hearing me talk about all these games they've never played. I guess it's just hard for me to understand that horror is inherently inaccessible, so making it digestible is just an appealing market to be in. Some people watch Let's Plays for the games they're unable to afford and possibly too immersed in to be able to finish. Some people like creepypastas about characters because it's just white noise to listen to before bed, and cryptids they know are more interesting than ones that they don't. Maybe I'm unwilling to change with the times, but I love horror the most when I go in expecting and knowing nothing. I never ask people what things are about, I never look up reviews or analysis pieces. I just walk straight through the fog and hope that something that terrifies me is waiting for me inside it. I spent all this time trying to find an answer for some grandiose point that I wanted to make, but the only thing I know is this. Hearing about mysteries and attempts to solve them is really fascinating to listen to on a long drive, or laying down trying to fall asleep in bed. But after a while, I think I started to resent how everything needs an answer. That the unfathomable becomes so dissected to the point of mere information, pushed into abstraction as it's decoupled from its intended presentation. I don't really care if people like that, and my words aren't to sell you on my beliefs. It's just something I struggle to accept, but I'll always love horror nonetheless. I think good horror is constantly being made, and a favorite of mine that I watched recently is Pearl. I plan to play games like Alan Wake 2, I'm eventually going to play Signalis. I feel like I've started to fall back in love with horror. All it took was ignoring the infinite quantities of analysis, explanations, lists, and theories that can take that joy away. I don't know why I wrote this video. I don't even know what I want to leave you with. All I really know is that modern horror leaves me feeling complex feelings, because I think games and movies have had plenty of great works as of late, yet I feel that frustration with content about horror, as opposed to horror content itself. Maybe I'm just weird, but I'd love to know how you feel about horror consumption and any feelings you may have about the genre and its respective mediums. I've been Meatman, and I hope you enjoyed your stay. And though the needle didn't really move for me, I hope my thoughts invite some interesting comments and reflections down below. Please join the Discord if you want to in the link below, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.